The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, Star Cable, and our continuously growing broadcast family of affiliates right across Canada, the United States, Central America, the Caribbean, South America, the Pacific Rim, Asia, India, Africa, and Europe. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. You know, X Zone Nation, this next hour is going to remind you a lot of that Wonderful Life Christmas movie that we all have loved over the years. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. My guest this hour is a gentleman by the name of Morrie Richfield. He's the author of Mr. Breeze, and it's a novel. And for 41 of his 55 years, our guest this hour, Morrie Richfield, had dreamed of writing and publishing books. He finally fulfilled his ambitions with the publication of Mr. Breeze, a provocative and fast-paced novel that is both a gripping page-turner and a philosophical exploration of man's origins and existence. Now, this is a quote from our guest this hour. Mr. Breeze is a book about hope. It asks, what if everything we've been taught turned out to be a lie? What would we do? How would we all be judged if our Maker was suddenly to appear? It asks us all to look inside ourselves and ask those questions. Well, joining me this hour is the author of Mr. Breeze. His name is Morrie Richfield. The website, www.mrbreezethenovel.com. And joining me from this beautiful state of Pennsylvania is Morrie Richfield. And Morrie, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much for having me.
You know, it's a great pleasure. When Charlie first sent me the information about your book, this is the kind of interview that I love doing because it brings hope. And as I said earlier, the parallel I drew between It's a Wonderful Life and your book, this is what the world needs today. And what was your inspiration for writing Mr. Breeze?
Well, I was going through a particularly bad time in my own life, a fairly painful and long divorce. And I looked around the world, and believe me, there was not a lot of good things going on. I was seeing terrible things happening on the news and reading about them. And I just decided one day that, maybe if I could write something that gave people a little bit of hope, maybe it would give me some hope, and maybe it would also help a bunch of other people. So I just sat down one day and started to type and just said, what if? And that's how I started it, with just the words, what if?
Every author comes to a point when writing a book that's a stumbling block. This is where usually the author's mind goes blank. Did that happen to you? And if so, what was the chapter?
Well, here's the weird thing. I consider myself a storyteller rather than an author. I have almost no formal education, and I write in stream of consciousness. In other words, I don't take notes. I don't do anything. I write as if I'm talking to myself and having a conversation with maybe let's call it the readers, or in this case, between the characters. And what I did was I woke up every single morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. I sat there with my 2 dogs and my cat, and from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, I drank my coffee, and I started to type. And since I'm not a very fast typer, it took 10 months, and I finished the book on October 31st, 2010, and I never skipped a day.
All right, Morrie, you and I have
stuck.
got to take a bit of a cliffhanger here because I have to take a 2-minute commercial break here.
Sure.
Exonation, my very special guest this hour is Morrie Richfield. He's the author of Mr. Breeze, www.mrbreezethenovel.com. Morrie and I will be back in 2 minutes. Don't go away. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Welcome back, everyone. Morrie Richfield is my special guest of this hour. He's the author of Mr. Breeze. His website is www. You got your pencils ready? I know you do. MrBreezethenovel.com. And you can get a copy of Mr. Breeze on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble right now. And Morrie, thanks very much for joining us. But let me ask you a question. I'm sure you've been asked these questions many times. What do you think would happen if the Creator, no matter what religious philosophy you believe in, and Lord knows there's enough of them today, would come down and say, ta-da! I'm here.
Well, first of all, we'd probably put him in an insane asylum. But here's the thing, and this is one of the what-if questions I ask myself. We all have our beliefs. I mean, various religions, various things, our history. And what if our Maker came down and basically said, your truths, all of your truths, are not true?
Yeah.
What would we do? We'd be all stuck. I mean, it's just, okay, well, everything you believe is wrong. Mm-hmm. So, and I didn't write Mr. Breeze to insult anyone's religions or anyone's beliefs, but what if everyone's truth turned out to not be true?
But you know what? That is a legitimate question. And it takes a very special kind of person to actually have the chutzpah or the cojones or the brass ones to ask it in today's society. I admire you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. It's not an easy question for people to swallow, and there might be some people who would say, "Oh, blasphemy," or "I'm a heretic," or whatever it might be. But this book is not about insulting anyone's belief. As I said, it is about offering another viewpoint,
an alternative.
Maybe could be true.
I asked the same question about 6 years ago. I said, "What if God was the devil and the devil really was God?"
Well, that's interesting that you should ask that question, because Revelation, the sequel, actually has a lot to do with those aspects, and I don't want to give that away, but there are, I mean, we all have our beliefs.
Sure.
And and I am all for everyone believing whatever it is that they want to believe.
Same here.
But Mr. Breeze is if you're an open, have an open mind, you have an open heart,
right,
you're going to read this book and you're going to say to yourself, wow. Okay, it's a really neat story, because I'm really just a storyteller, and it's inspirational. It says to people, be a better person, for God's sake, because
and that's
God's here and He's telling you to be one.
And that's the message we need to get across in today's world. Look at all the fighting. Look at all the sickness. Look at all the hunger. Look at the unemployment. Look at the homeless. We need to hear words of inspiration in these days.
I agree, and sometimes those words of inspiration can come from just the concept of just, taking reality away for a second and using that whole theory of willful suspension of reality and burying yourself into a story like this and coming away and looking in the mirror and saying, what can I do to be a better person? And if everybody does it, well, I mean, we'd have a much better world, I think.
I agree with you. And, you know, when I use the parallel between Mr. Breeze and It's a Wonderful Life, I don't think there's one person listening tonight who does not, at some time during the Christmas season, look for that movie because it touches our hearts. We all want to see good things happen. We all want a happy ending at the end of the story. Where do you think that people are making their biggest mistake today? How would Mr. Breeze look at the world? Or how does Mr. Breeze look at the world?
Mr. Breeze looks at the world and thinks that we have given up our humanity for our technology.
Yeah.
And he believes that we have substituted talking for texting and emailing, and we have in-person contact for video chats, and our kids, instead of outside playing, are inside in front of televisions and handheld video games. And it's easy, I mean, in his mind, at least. Killing is simple when you get to push a button and you don't have to look the person in the eye to do it.
That's
Warfare
right.
has become a question of, here, I'm going to kill you. I'm 8,000 miles away, but I'm going to blow you up.
Exactly.
And in his mind, our technology has not given us anything except for making us less human.
You know, I had a guest on the show a number of years ago who said the number 666 that is depicted as the mark of the devil is actually the new WWW.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far. I have seen firsthand myself how people have conversations with each other in the same house and they're actually texting on their phones, and that seems a bit abnormal to me.
Hey,
but for some people, it's norm.
My sister-in-law lets all the kids know in her house by texting them. And now, I find it ridiculous, especially when all you have to do is go to the bottom of the staircase and yell up, "Supper's ready." That's how my parents did it. And you know what I do with my kids, my grandkids? I kick them out of the house without their Blackberries, without their cell phones. And when they come here to see my wife and I, they have to put their cell phones, their iPads, their iPods, or whatever the I is of the day, in a box that we have beside the front door on a table. You come to see us, you don't need that.
Well, I'm 55 years old. I did not come from wealthy background, and when I was a child, I tease people and I tell my kids that the only toy I had was a shoebox and a stick. But the truth of the matter is that we were out there playing stickball, we were playing catch, we were playing games. There was no such thing, obviously, as video games or computers for people. But today, things are different, and I'm not saying that we need to remove all these things. And the book, as I said, it's a fictional thing. But when you ask the question of what Mr. Breeze would think, I think he would think that our society has become far less humane and far less civilized than it was before all this.
Now, you as a youngster, I understood, left home for 4 years to be with the Grateful Dead. What was that like, and how did that experience influence Mr. Breeze?
Well, I guess I heard my first Grateful Dead song when I was about 9 years old, and I guess I just sort of fell into that sort of. I was in the end of the hippie era. I mean, by a few years, but I got an early start, and it influenced me in a way to see people and see things without prejudices and without, putting people on you're rich, you're poor, you're black, you're white, you're American, you're not American. It was just everybody enjoying music, and it didn't matter who you were back then. Yeah, I mean, obviously things have changed, but it's the way I think still. I mean, like I said, I've been fortunate as a man without much education to achieve what I have, and I've been fortunate enough to make this dream of mine come true. But I think it all comes down to how open-minded you really are. And from what I see in this country, at least, with the elections coming and everything else, people are not really open-minded anymore. They just think this is. If somebody says something, it's true. Without proof or at all. I mean, look at political ads. I mean, my
gosh.
God.
That's that if our kids watch this, they're going to get the total wrong impression of how elections and how society should be acting. And when you listen to the political leaders of today, and they just open their mouths to change feet.
I would tend to agree with you there. And you asked me what would happen if our maker did come down, and I jokingly said we'd put him in an asylum, but we would not believe, because everybody who wants to be a believer would never really believe, because he would have to show proof.
Exactly.
And chances are that proof would have to be such intense power over all of us that we would succumb and submit, and there would be a great deal of us, maybe all of us, who would find out that whatever we believe isn't right. So, I mean, I'm not so sure a lot of people would be hoping for the maker to be coming back,
right,
because it may prove us, a great many of us, or all of us, wrong about a great many things.
Exonation, my guest this hour is Morrie Richfield. He's the author of Mr. Breeze, www.mrbreezethenovel.com. So, when you were with the Grateful Dead, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I think it was more like, I think anybody who had ever spent a lot of time going to Grateful Dead shows would probably understand what it was like. It was a community. People shared things with each other. You know, I'm not going to get into the somewhat illegal aspects of things that went on there. I think everybody pretty much knows that. But it was a time of joy. It was all about the music, and people would dance around, and most of them weren't straight, but it just turned out that it was just a free-for-all. I'm not going to call it a love-in, because it wasn't really like that. It was just a community of people, all with one common interest. And you don't see that so much anymore. No. I mean, people may follow bands, and they say, but the days of the 60s and the 70s when I was doing it, those are different times. Yeah,
it wasn't so commercialized. Like, bands today are out for the almighty dollar. Back in our day, bands were out there because they believed in the cause, they believed in their music, and they wanted to make a positive difference.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't a stage show, and it didn't have lights, and they didn't change costumes 65 times, and nobody's boobs fell out of the stage. It was just, I mean, Janis Joplin may have fallen down a couple times, but you know what? That's just the way things were back then. And I believe me, I'm not longing for a return for those things, and I'm not even saying it should happen, but it certainly it was the basis of a lot of the beliefs that I grew up with, and the things that influenced me as an adult.
Stand by, Morrie. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation. A refreshing hour this hour with my guest, Morrie Richfield. He's the author of Mr. Breeze, the novel. It's available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble, and visit his website, www.mrbreezethenovel.com. And Morrie Richfield and I will be back on the other side of the news, and some words from our fine sponsors as the X-Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in beautiful Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. Morrie Richfield is my special guest. He's the author of Mr. Breeze, the novel. His website is www.mrbreezethenovel.com. As the author, what, in your opinion, is the most exciting part within the story of Mr. Breeze?
I think the most exciting part is the fact that Mr. Breeze chooses a man named Michael Ryan, who is an unbeliever. He's picked because he's in a very unique situation he could write. And unlike most of us who become unbelievers because of life situations, this particular man never believed in anything, even as a child. And the story is also about his transformation and what happens to him as he witnesses these magnificent, sometimes unbelievable feats. And as time goes by, Mr. Breeze reveals to him who he really is. And the book itself is kind of designed that way, so it kind of keeps people's interest, but it also isn't really that hard to read, because I didn't want some book, and I've read things by writers that are so complicated you need to get a dictionary out to figure out what they're talking about.
Would you say Mr. Breeze would, if I was sitting down talking to Mr. Breeze, and would he tell me the world of today is so complicated because we humans have complicated it, where actually life is very simple?
Well, I think that what Mr. Breeze would tell you is that he had given us certain abilities, certain characteristics, certain intellectual capabilities, and we use them in the wrong way. And I think he would probably tell you that he's not happy about it. And I don't know about you and or to the listeners out there, but if our Maker suddenly came to me while I was in the shower in the morning and looked at me and said, "It's judgment time, fella," I'd be shaking in my shoes.
You and me both, my friend.
You know, and I think most people would be.
Sure.
So I think that's what he would tell you.
What is the main message that you, as the author of Mr. Breeze, would like your reader to walk away with?
I'd like them to... first of all, I'd like them to say I can't wait for the sequel and can't wait to make it to see it on the big screen and make a movie out of it. That would be good. But I think after that, I would like people to think that they were not only entertained, but they were moved in some way, and to a point where they'd like to say to themselves, you know, maybe I can do something a little nicer and be a little nicer and be a little better and be a little more open-minded and not blow my horn at every person in the middle of traffic and that kind of thing. That's what I mean. I'm not hoping for any giant movements here, but just a little bit of hope would be good.
We were talking about the Grateful Dead and the movement before we went to our news break at the bottom of the hour. I've always said that the hippies had the right idea. Their timing was a little off. I
tend to think you might be right. It was that whole, let's face it.
Yeah.
Make love, not war is a pretty good thing to say.
Sure is.
You know, give peace a chance
Yeah.
is yeah. You're watching John Lennon and Yoko sitting in a bed, saying they just want to they're going to have a peace rally laying there. It was considered a publicity stunt by some people, silly by others. Yep. But you know what? It was somebody trying to do something.
Sure, it did wonders for the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, where they pulled off the peace movement in bed. Yeah, worked great for them.
Yeah, but you see, one person can't change the world, but one person can change themselves.
Well, yeah, plus one person can start the wheel moving. Look what happened with Jesus. He was one person, and look what happened all the years later. How many people are following him based on his movement?
That's true.
Yeah.
And there, everybody follows everybody. The word God that we seem to throw around so much, all of us, or many of us, is, they've been using that word. I don't know how long, but the Greeks used it. Long before Jesus was ever born, and certainly it's been the Chinese, everybody has had some form of God in their civilization through as far back as we have records, almost.
But I've often asked my guests this question. Was the creation of God by humanity a way of explaining the unexplainable at a time when so little was known about anything? And do we use God and the devil as a scapegoat? Well, thank God I got this. Instead of saying, you know what, I worked hard for that. Or the devil made me do it. Instead of saying, hey, you know what, I did that. I screwed up. I'm sorry. It's easier to pass the buck.
Well, that's true. And some of the answers to those questions, Mr. Breeze gives Michael Ryan in the book. And one of the main things that he allowed us to believe in certain things at a time, because in his words, we were young and foolish, and he talks about at one point when we were nothing but crawling around on the ground, where he had to take away our weapons from us a number of times because we started hitting each other with them.
Yeah.
And giving, and let's put it this way, you put a bunch of people in a room, in a group, and somebody wants to take charge. That's just the way things work in our world today. Somebody has to be in charge. The question is, why?
Well, because I don't think that anybody, or that the majority of people, want to take the responsibility of being leaders. Because a leader is responsible for the actions of those behind him, usually, except in Washington and Ottawa. Because once you become a leader, it's your neck that's on the line. And in today's society, a lot of people say, hey, I don't want to get involved. And this is where a big part of the problem is.
Well, I don't want to give too much. I don't want to give away the sequel yet, but there's one particular thing that Michael Ryan asked Mr. Breeze in the sequel Revelation, and he says to him, he goes, "But I'm just an ordinary man." And Mr. Breeze answers him and says, "All men are ordinary until they do something extraordinary." And I believe that is true. We are all just ordinary people until we do something extraordinary. And maybe that something extraordinary is to change yourself, and maybe that something extraordinary is to find a cure for something. But we all have it in us to do something extraordinary for ourselves. I believe that. And as far as politicians and leaders and things like that, it's unfortunate that the wars that are started in the world and throughout the world are generally started by old men and usually fought by young men.
That's right.
And it's just, if you look back in history, we have fought wars over different beliefs in religion and territories and some of the silliest things, that you can think about, we fought wars over, And if you want to talk about the hippie thing, that's definitely make love, not war, because we could have avoided an awful lot of wars if we had done that.
Yeah, and of course during the time of the hippie evolution, as I like to call it, Vietnam was going on a totally senseless war that many of us just watched as friends and neighbors and loved ones were put, never came home. I know myself, I have a number of relatives that lost their lives in the Vietnam War. And, to me, it was a useless, senseless war. It certainly put a lot of money in a lot of pockets in the big industries in the United States. But when you look at the amount of lives lost, and for what? There was no reason. There was no real cause. There was no real threat.
Well, I tend to agree with you there, and I think that some people could make the argument for almost every war that has happened.
Yeah.
We fought a war. In this country, in the United States, we fought many wars. Even ones against ourselves for various reasons. But any time that you lose lives for something that gains you nothing, you're definitely fighting a worthless war and a useless war. And I believe that 100%.
Does Mr. Breeze touch on the topic of alternative energy and what's happening in the world today with the fossil fuel emissions, global warming, and the conquest for oil?
No. We don't. It doesn't go that deep. It basically looks at the human spirit and it looks at our history and mankind itself and how we have evolved. And, basically, Michael Ryan, who is the person I always tell you about who's writing the story of Mr. Breeze, following him, is fighting Mr. Breeze for our continued existence. Because, believe me, our existence is certainly not guaranteed as far as Mr. Breeze is concerned.
Well, does Mr. Breeze pose the possibility that he may wipe out our existence?
Yes.
Ooh.
And Mr. Breeze leaves us with a message. And that message is on the last, is in the book. Mm-hmm. And what we do with that message is the basis for the sequel, Revelation. And this is, as I said, our existence is certainly not guaranteed. And given his feelings at the moment and giving us, we're basically getting one last chance. And the reason that Mr. Breeze finally sought out Michael Ryan to tell this story and to write these and did all these miraculous things and showed himself as God to all of us is so we would learn something, finally, and to give us one last chance to change.
What was that all-important lesson that Mr. Breeze was trying to get across?
Well, basically, Mr. Breeze is trying to say that we're given a few choices, and I don't want to give too much away because the whole idea, of course, is I'd like to get people to actually buy the book, so I don't want to tell them the whole story. But he says to us, or he says to Michael Ryan to convey to us that we subjugate our fellow man, we kill our own children, we still enslave people, we kill for no reason. We have destroyed ourselves by trying to be, and our egos and our arrogance are beyond belief, as if we are the only thing that is important. And he wants us to know we are not.
What else is there?
I guess we're going to find out.
No, I mean, if we do not consider ourselves as important, how do we succeed?
Well, I think if you look, as I said, I don't want to give too much away, but Mr. Breeze offers us another alternative and gives us a chance to either change ourselves or he will put the alternative into effect. And that's what I kind of believe that our Maker would do if he saw our situation. I mean, you asked before, what happens if he shows up? Yeah. If he sees what we become, do you think he's going to go patting us on the head and say, nice fellas, nice ladies, you guys done a great job, and you got a beer? I mean, I don't think so.
Let me ask you a question. What happens if there is no maker, that the entire philosophy about a maker, a creator, is nothing else but a crock, and we're responsible to ourselves?
Interesting fact. And see, one of the things that Mr. Breeze really is, you see, we use the word God because God is the most omnipotent thing we can think of. Okay, but if you read the book and you read, as I said, it offers a different perspective as to who God really is. And you touched on it a little before, but I don't want to, as I said, I don't want to give too much away. But it basically said, what happens if there was this being that was just so powerful that we couldn't figure out anything else he was except for God?
Well, you see, the way I see it is I think God, or whoever this being is, gave us a hint in the book of Genesis when he said, and God said, let us create man in our image, our likeness, because if, in fact, we are created in his likeness and his image, then we're all, each and every one of us, gods.
That could be true. The problem is, as and as Mr. Breeze points out, he gave us rules. His words to Michael Ryan in one of their discussions was, he didn't give us a Bible, he didn't give us a Torah, he didn't give us any religious books. He gave us a bunch of rules, and he didn't give us religion. We gave religion to ourselves. All
right, stand by. We've got to take our final break here. Exonation, Morrie Richfield is our guest. www.MrBreezeTheNovel.com. His book, Mr. Breeze, is available at Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. My name is Rob McConnell. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as the X Zone continues around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
And welcome back, everyone. Our guest this hour is Morrie Richfield. We're talking to Morrie about his book that is currently out entitled Mr. Breeze. It's available at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and his website is www.mrbreezethenovel.com. And there is a Mr. Breeze sequel in the works. The working title is Revelation, the Return of Mr. Breeze. The second book is about how we take the message from the first book and what we do with it. First of all, Morrie, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. I wish you much success. And I can hardly wait until we see you on the big screen.
Well, hopefully, I keep waiting for that phone call from Hollywood. I guess I might have to wait a little longer. One of these days soon, I think it'll come.
Well, what's the final message that you'd like to leave with the X-Zone Nation tonight, Morrie?
Well, I think I'd like to. I would hope that everyone who has that first of all, as I said, Mr. Breeze is not a book that is designed to insult anyone's beliefs. Mm-hmm. It is not a book to offer some new religious cult. It is basically a complete work of fiction that is designed to be somehow uplifting, engaging, and an interesting and story that you can take in. And as I said, if you have an open mind and an open heart, I think you'll enjoy it as what it is, which is a unique. From what I'm told, there's never been anything written anywhere near like it before. Mm-hmm. So I hope everyone will enjoy it.
Now, when do you expect the release of your sequel?
Well, it appears from what I'm told that it will be out in January. It's just about finished, and it has to go through the editing process, but hopefully it will be out in January, maybe earlier.
So we can look forward to it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble just shortly after Christmas.
Yes.
All righty. Once again, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Well, I thank you very much, Rob. I look forward to coming back at some point in time. Have a wonderful night. And
you too, my friend. Once again, X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour has been Morrie Richfield. His website is www.mrbreezethenovel.com. And we were talking to Morrie about his new book that is out. Well, it came out in the year 2011, and it's just picking up steam now, Mr. Breeze. And basically, Mr. Breeze is a provocative novel that offers hopes as it raises startling questions about mankind's fate. Once again, www.mrbreezethenovel.com. And Mr. Breeze is available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. Let me see, what else do we have to share with our fine members of the X-Zone Nation? Oh, yeah. There's new X Chronicles newspaper stand up and running. It's at www.xchronicles-newspaper.com/newspaperstand.htm. And the X-Zone Book Club will be launching tomorrow evening. Another exciting part as we keep on growing here in the X-Zone. Geez, it just seems like 20 years ago we started in a little station. And look where we are today, around the world, thanks to you, the members of the X-Zone Nation. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break at 6.5 minutes past the hour as we continue with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.